Okay, we are live. So, I'm going to get right into it. We're going to read this article called The Charitable Industrial Complex by, you guessed it, Peter Buffett. So, obviously, he is the most apt person to write this article, right? I had spent much of my life writing music for commercials, film, and television, and knew little about the world of philanthropy as practiced by the very wealthy until what I call the Big Bang happened in 2006. That year, my father, Warren Buffett, made good on his commitment to give nearly all of his accumulated wealth back to society. In addition to making several large donations, he added generously to the three foundations that my parents had created years earlier, one for each of their children to run. Early on in our philanthropic journey, my wife and I became aware of something I started to call philanthropic colonialism. I noticed that a donor had the urge to save the day in some fashion. I mean, isn't that kind of the essence of philanthropy, though? All right. People, including me, who had very little knowledge of a particular place, would think they could solve a local problem, whether it involved farming methods, education practices, job training, or business development. Over and over, I would hear people discuss transplanting what worked in one setting directly into another with little regard for culture, geography, or societal norms. That's some heavy irony right there. We're gonna get into it. Often the results of our decisions had unintended consequences. Blah, blah, blah. But now I think something even more damaging is going on. Because of who my father is, I've been able to occupy some seats I've never expected to sit in. Inside any important philanthropy meeting, you witness heads of state meeting with investment managers and corporate leaders. All are searching for answers with their right hand to problems that others in the room have created with their left. There are plenty of statistics that tell us that inequality is continually rising. At the same time, according to the Urban Institute, the nonprofit sector has been steadily growing. Between 2001 and 2011, the number of nonprofits increased 25%. Interesting timing, don't you think? 2001? Their growth rate now exceeds that of both the business and government sectors. It's a massive business with approximately 316 billion given away in 2012 in the United States alone and more than 9.4 million employed. Philanthropy has become the it vehicle to level the playing field and has generated a growing number of gatherings, workshops, and affinity groups. As more lives and communities are destroyed by the system that creates vast amounts of wealth for the few, the more heroic it sounds to give back. That's what I would call conscience laundering. Feeling better about accumulating more than any one person could possibly need to live on by sprinkling a little around as an act of charity. But this just keeps the existing structure of inequality in place. The rich sleep better at night while others get just enough to keep the pot from boiling over. Nearly every time someone feels better by doing good on the other side of the world or street, someone else is further locked into a system that will not allow the true flourishing of his or her nature or the opportunity to live a joyful and fulfilled life. And with more business-minded folks getting into the act, business principles are trumpeted as an important element to add to the philanthropic sector. I now hear people ask, what's the ROI when it comes to alleviating human suffering, as if return on investment were the only measure of success. Microlending and financial literacy, now I'm going to upset people who are wonderful folks and a few dear friends, what is this really about? People will certainly learn how to integrate into our system of debt and repayment with interest. People will rise above making $2 a day to enter our world of goods and services so they can buy more. But doesn't all this just feed the beast? So, to be honest, microlending and financial literacy are things that I'm very interested in. And I mean, to discuss, like, okay, these people are creating the problems with their right hand or creating the problems with the left hand, solving them with their right. Microlending and financial literacy might be the other hand of what he's trying to propose as a solution to all of this. I'm not really sure, but what I do know is, I mean, the literacy aspect, I find it kind of hard to argue against that. I find personal empowerment in being aware of how money works, just so that I can figure out what makes the most sense for me. So I'm not sure, because here's the thing, like what is this beautiful new system that he is promising us here? It's kind of unclear, isn't it? Like, it's like, okay, this is our system of debt and repayment with interest. All right, so then what exactly is Peter Buffett calling for instead? And I'm calling this episode Novo Linguistic Programming because the Novo Foundation is his foundation. So, first of all, he's very critical of philanthropy while very much practicing it, which is interesting in and of itself. And also, he's using certain terms, certain language to get people on his side, in my opinion. I mean, that appears to be what this is, right? He's calling for radical change, change that goes to the root of a problem and not trying to use other solutions that would, I guess, in a way, just put a band-aid on it and actually further the problem, right? So that's kind of, and now he's saying, I'm calling for humanism. And so I think it's also kind of misleading to put these two things against each other, capitalism and humanism, because, well, first of all, we don't really actually live under any sort of ism. I think that's important to note. Like, capitalism is just a philosophical concept that exists kind of in a vacuum. Like, I mean, it has like a history of, certain thinkers and so forth, and certain practical applications. But as far as like the system that we're actually living under, I mean, we are living under more close, what's something that resembles fascism, I think, more closely, because it's a public-private partnership. This whole thing about unfettered capitalism has always kind of like confused me, because, yeah, in a sense, capitalism has never been practiced. Neither has communism. Fascism seems to be like the closest thing to what we actually have. And so it's interesting that like making money is somehow posed as being directly contrary to humanism. And what is humanism? Again, like these are, he's using like kind of these broad terms here, but we know that there's been a concerted effort by the elite to trash whatever they want to call capitalism, right? or just maybe use the word capitalism in a derogatory sense. We've seen that there's like been a huge push for that. So it's just interesting, because what are the practical results of any of this is my question. Like, we can talk about the isms all day, capitalism, humanism, whatever, but what does this look like in practice? Okay, that's kind of the angle that I'm coming at here. Often I hear people say, if only they had what we have: clean water, access to health products and free markets, better education, safer living conditions. Yes, these are all important, but no charitable, I hate that word, intervention can solve any of these issues. It can only kick the can down the road. Well, then, again, like the irony of this, when you run like a huge philanthropic organization, is just, it's kind of astounding. My wife and I know we don't have the answers, but we do know how to listen. Oh, Peter Buffett is listening to you. As we learn, we will continue to support conditions for systemic change. Okay, big change is coming from Peter Buffett. It's time for a new operating system. Fucking transhumanists using computer language to describe humanity. Not a 2.0 or a 3.0, but something built from the ground up. New code. What we have is a crisis of imagination. Really? We have a crisis of imagination? That's the root of our problems here? Albert Einstein said you cannot solve a problem with the same mindset that created it. Foundation dollars should be the best risk capital out there. There are people working hard at showing examples of other ways to live in a functioning society that truly creates greater prosperity for all, and I don't mean more people getting to have more stuff. Okay? Money should be spent trying out concepts that shatter current structures and systems that have turned much of the world into one vast market. Is progress really Wi-Fi in every street corner? No, it's when a 13-year-old girl on the it's when no 13-year-old girl on the planet gets sold for sex. I mean, look, like I stand by that 100%, right? But like, do I really trust that coming from him? No. But as long as most folks are patting themselves on the back for charitable acts, we've got a perpetual poverty machine. It's an old story. We really need a new one. I agree, Peter. So let's just see like what Peter's idea of solving the world's problems actually looks like in this, systemic change that he's talking about. But first of all, I want to talk about I want to touch on briefly sort of the context of who this person is, and obviously Warren Buffett is his father, so that's very important. This article, The Truth About Warren Buffett's Children, basically seems like some sort of, I don't know, propaganda piece, I guess, if you will, to make the Buffetts look good. Apparently, Warren Buffett raised his children in such a way that did not make them aware of their wealth. Or at least that's what this article purports to claim. But, I mean, very quickly you can see that that's not really the case. Peter Buffett got a 90 grand stock inheritance at the age of 19. So, I mean, even if he spent the first 18 years of his life not realizing they had money, that's pretty big. Like, have any of you inherited a $90,000 stock inheritance at the age of 19? I don't know. Instead of leaving the 90 grand in Berkshire Hathaway stock, where it would be worth over 200 million these days, Peter sold the stock and bought recording equipment. Yeah, so he's like a musician, I mean, honestly, I feel like he should have just stuck with that. That's kind of my thing with some of these people. It's like, okay, just do your art, just make your music, and maybe stay out of politics a little more. Yeah, so I guess, I don't know, the idea is to kind of paint him as someone who understands the common person, right? Because, he struggled financially once or twice. Clearly, that's not the case anymore. His nonprofit, the Novo Foundation, has been buying up property in Kingston, New York, and rebuilding the town kind of all on its own. And so that's going to be the focus of this video, actually, is Kingston, New York. So, yeah, now we're going to go into this Tablet magazine article about Kingston. This is an interesting tidbit too. Novo had to turn away its earlier projects, namely its support of women and girls, to focus on Kingston, New York. So that's the thing. And so he's a charitable giver who criticizes charitable giving. I think it's just a piece of mindfuckery, honestly. I mean, either that or this is like the biggest example of cognitive dissonance one could ever imagine. So, anyways, yeah, white saviorism. Yeah, it's just really interesting. It sparked a lot of debate on the internet, right? And as it should. I mean, this guy whose father made all of this money through, one could argue, capitalist systems, criticizing capitalism. So yeah, he's painting himself as somewhat of a subversive person here. But I really question how that's even possible. The apple never falls far from the tree, right? Okay. So this article is going to be the focus of this video. I'm going to try and just summarize it. If you want to read the whole thing, I have show notes below. So you can definitely read the whole thing by yourself if that's faster for you. I'll just read through some of the key points here. So yeah, Kingston, New York used to be the leadership hub of IBM, and so it used to employ a lot of people, and it lost more than the residents lost more than 20% of their income after IBM pulled out. So that kind of sets the tone, right? It's a impoverished city, um, suffering from drug trafficking, gang feuds, intense poverty. 40% of the county residents struggle to pay their bills and put food on the table. Yes, that's very sad. But I think this is why the redevelopment is so great, Heidegger pivoted. It's going to change the narrative, and change how people feel about this place. Heidegger is now the deputy director of the economic department, or development department, and spokesperson for Ulster County's major real estate project, a once-in-a-generation opportunity, as it was called in a recently published vision plan, to make the 82 acres of the campus into a high-traffic hub for new businesses, artists, and innovative makers of food and culture. Okay. I'm not sure if I've looked at this. Yeah, building a people-centered economy. So I pulled a bunch of quotes from this document that we're going to go into. In 2019, the county had taken over a large chunk of the campus from the post-IBM property owner, blah, 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 real estate developer when he failed to pay millions in property taxes. So it's going to be called Tech City. IBM produced a wide variety of technology and military communication systems here, from terminals to air defense systems to electric typewriters that rolled off a 2-mile-long assembly line. Okay. I want to reach out to anybody that was impacted by IBM. Healing the space. Though more than 20 businesses and organizations in the region have proposals for reimagining Tech City, everyone already knows who has the winning bid. A consortium known as Blueprint, promising as many as 300 new jobs within 5 years, and popular crowd pleasers like a skate park and an art center, besides more radically ambitious projects like a grain mill and a new food distribution system, will go through the motions along with other applicants. But Blueprint is considered the obvious winner, so much so that parts of its proposal are already being implemented. In June, Blueprint even kicked off its takeover of Tech City with a robot-themed dance party complete with bartenders and DJs. Kind of have to see this. Oh, never mind. Oh well. Blueprint, as some in Kingston now realize, is just one of the many new marquee endeavors of the Novo Foundation, the nonprofit entity founded by Peter Buffett, the son of Warren Buffett. The Novo Foundation is one of the richest philanthropic operations in the world, endowed every year with a tranche of Berkshire Hathaway stock earmarked by the elder Buffett, Berkshire's founder, for each of his children's philanthropic foundations. Novo is run by Peter and his second wife, Jennifer, with whom he shares the CEO title. The Buffetts operate the foundation out of the modest historic stone building in Kingston, where the two have lived since 2010. The couple's investment in the town began nearly a decade ago, a few years after they moved there. In 2014, Novo paid $13 million for a Gill Farm, a 1,500-acre family crop farm that belonged to John Gill, a second-generation farmer and Kingston personality who tended to leave an impression on people. Jovial and intelligent, he was a guest on the Colbert Report in 2010 and a visible emblem of the area's ties to small family farming. They literally bought the heart and soul of Ulster County that day, a longtime resident and former Novo Foundation collaborator told me. Everything else is just icing on the cake. It was the largest agriculture producer in the country, and John Gill was a personality larger than life. Few initially saw the acquisition as a problem. The Novo Foundation renamed the property the Hudson Valley Farm Hub and promised to fight systemic food scarcity by making it into a new distribution center for Hudson Valley's agriculture. The old Gill farm would still produce vegetables while taking its crops fully organic, training aspiring farmers in the trade and carrying out grain trials to develop more resilient crops, all things John Gill had wanted but couldn't afford to do himself. The farm hub was a big purchase, and the Novo Foundation had the money to make an open-ended commitment to support it, with at least 89 million spent and another 47 million promised to the farm hub and its programs over the next several years, and that was only the beginning. To date, at least 160 million and perhaps more than 250 million has been spent by the Novo Foundation to purchase real estate, construct buildings, and launch a kaleidoscope suite of projects that are more analogous to Celebration, the Walt Disney Corporation's master planned Southern Florida community, than any familiar form of philanthropic giving. Okay, that's why I'm pointing this out, is because I would like to crusade against this private town's shit. It's bullshit. Celebration, Florida is bullshit. Towns being owned by companies is bullshit. And like, I don't care what you fucking publish on the internet, Peter Buffett. That's exactly what you're creating. So fuck you. I don't care what you have to say. All right. Novo is the predominant or exclusive funder of Kingston's local news media and radio station, a local printed currency, a 1,500-acre farm and produce distribution center, a food co-op, a museum, a think tank, and a mutual aid network, a healthcare network, a hospital, the Kingston Land Bank, the YMCA, the community center, and dozens of nonprofits that are working on all imaginable forms of community projects. Novo has made unusual grants to both the city of Kingston and Ulster County, unusual because it is picking up the tab for traditional government services. In 2018 alone, it gave $4.1 million to the county and nearly $250,000 to the city of Kingston for routine operating expenses. During the pandemic, the county opened an emergency relief fund that within 24 hours received a $2 million anonymous donation. No one seriously considered the identity of the benefactor to be a mystery. If the Buffetts were to maintain their current spending pace over the next 10 years, a conservative estimate would put their investments in Kingston at over $500 million. This unprecedented top-down revolution has had varying effects on the people who live there. Some of those effects are clearly positive. No doubt the money for food pantries has put meals on the table for those who needed it, just as the grants for school programs and repairs to the local pool have made life better for those in the city. Yet over and over again, Kingston residents and Novo collaborators alike have expressed dismay about how Novo has conducted so much of its business without public input. According to the Novo recipients and Novo collaborators I spoke to, a loose set of rules applies to Novo's largesse. You don't discuss your grants from Novo, you don't criticize Novo in public, and you don't speak ill of the Buffetts, lest you jeopardize your funding. On the one hand, I'd say, gee, we're really fucked, the longtime resident and former Novo Foundation collaborator told me. But then again, it's like, well, get more of that Buffett money, would you? For some, that's precisely the problem. For a county without a solid economic base and persistent issues with poverty, food insecurity, and even public safety, linking Ulster's fate to a single benefactor feels like a recipe for disaster, the same one it suffered when IBM left town. If you're an intelligent person, you have to be at least a little bit wary of huge amounts of money coming into your county with no ability to leverage any longevity or any kind of guarantee or any sort of accountability, one Kingston local and Novo funding recipient told me. My concern at this point is that they've invested more money than the actual budget of the city of Kingston, without there being any sort of democratic process. Whether or not we like the current city government, we get to vote for the mayor. We vote for the council. They allocate the money. And even if I hate everything they do with it, at least I have the right to vote for them. This is a family foundation led by a billionaire literally creating a plan for a community that I live in, a plan to create this post-capitalist or whatever utopia in Kingston. And we have no say in what that plan is. Warren Buffett's earned fortune was recently estimated to have topped $100 billion, but throughout his career, he has managed to convey an image of a happy, regular, well-adjusted, normal, idyllic, very calm, totally supportive, thoroughly nurturing, and modest family man living in the same family home in suburban Omaha that he bought in 1958, the year that Peter, the youngest of Warren's 3 children, was born. Peter has said that he had only a vague awareness that the family was wealthy growing up, and the family's vacation house on Laguna Beach in Southern California being one indication. Warren never wanted to overindulge his children. His oft-quoted wish was to bestow them with enough so that they can do anything, but not enough so they can do nothing. Though Peter had the promise of free college tuition, he chose to make the family gift of $90K at 19 and drop out after a few semesters at Stanford to pursue the life of a professional musician. Beyond the $90K worth of stock Peter cashed in as a teenager in 1977, he received an additional $300,000 gift from his father to fund his Native American rock opera. He also had Berkshire Hathaway stock worth at least $500K, and in 2004, 6 years before he published his memoir on lessons learned working hand to mouth as a commercial composer, he inherited $10 million after the death of his mother. When Peter turned 48, however, everything changed. In 2006, Warren Buffett announced he was giving away the majority of his vast wealth to charity, splitting it between the Melinda and Gates Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the 3 philanthropies overseen by each of his children. So, yeah. The Gates Foundation. Ooh. Okay, blah, blah, blah. A soul recognition that we had work to do together. Oh my gosh. He has a soul connection with his wife. That's beautiful. Okay. Now this is interesting. This is kind of touching on what the other article said about them pulling funding. The women's building project was suddenly shut down. And a letter was published on the foundation's website, which has since been taken down, announcing that after deep reflection, beginning as far back as the summer of 2019, Novo was stepping back to review our work over the past 14 years in order to determine how best to move into our next chapter. So, Novo had become one of the most significant philanthropies in the women's sector, was responsible for 37% of private funding for all women's rights and services for Black women, and 17% of women's rights and female-related human services in the United States. Staff made frantic calls to grantees to tell them their programs were gone. Half of Novo's 36 employees were laid off. Laid off staffers were required to sign non-disclosure agreements as part of their severance packages. The sudden change of plans reverberated throughout the Novo universe. Black Lives Matter co-founder Alicia Garza, a longtime recipient of Novo funding, told one publication that she was getting emotional about it because I think Novo was one of the premier foundations working to transform power dynamics in this country, adding that her inquiries about what was happening had gone unanswered. The lack of transparency is not only painful, it's jarring. Yeah, sounds like it. Peter pushed back against the criticism, saying in one interview that Berkshire stock was down, and Novo shouldn't be expected to pick up the tab for minority women's programming indefinitely. Following the blow-up, the website Inside Philanthropy gave the Novo Foundation the award for Trainwreck of the Year, noting that the episode should serve at least as a devastating reminder that even the most generous benefactors can always pull the rug out from underneath you. Yeah, nothing in life is free. Nothing. Fuck, yeah, this post-capitalist shit, I mean, come on, nothing in life is free. Let's stop pretending that. Okay. Oh, and he had an epiphany, right? This is why he pulled his funding for those organizations. My work in Kingston, Peter said on a 2019 panel, was informed more than anything else from one event, and that was after Hurricane Irene. While out surveying the damage around his new estate, he was struck by what the intense flooding had done to the tall, mature trees. I started to see these ingredients as the ground, literally and figuratively, and thought we can soak this not indiscriminately, and start to see where we can soak the ground and see what can fall over. What? He was inspired by the fact that there was so much damage done to his estate after Hurricane Irene. And what he got from that was, what else can fall over? If he realized that it was a bit unsettling to liken Novo money to a hurricane that killed more than 50 people and led to $14 billion in damages, he didn't let on. We're trying to practice 21st century alchemy, he added. We're trying to turn money into love. Okay, whatever, dude. All in all, it was a rather strange way to articulate a philanthropic enterprise. But as people were starting to realize, Peter Buffett was a strange man. In the Midtown neighborhood of Kingston is one of the buildings that the Novo Foundation is currently renovating into an upgraded studio space for its media operation, Radio Kingston. The foundation purchased the local radio station for $500,000 in 2017, installing Kelly Merriman, Novo's COO, to oversee the station's fiscal operations, and Peter Buffett as the chair of its board of directors. A contract deal was made with a recently formed reporting outfit called the Kingston Wire, which would produce news broadcasts for the station. The Novo Foundation pumped $1.7 million, and then another $13 million, and then another $12 million into the radio station's operating budget. On a program called The Laura Flanders Show, itself the recipient of $250,000 in Novo funding in 2017, Peter described Radio Kingston as not just a radio station, but as something else. It's about all these other ways it can put its tentacles into the community. Okay, I want to pause here and actually play that part of the video. Just so you can hear him say it, because it's kind of amazing.
That could happen in any community. First off, why invest in a radio station? You two are not media funders, generally speaking. You don't have a chain of radio stations with the word Buffett on them. So why here in Kingston, Radio Kingston?
Well, it really starts from the fact that we live here, and we started to recognize what a special and typical, both, community this was. It's a town of 25,000 people. It has percentages of pretty much everything that any town USA has. And so as I started to think about our philanthropic work that we do here and there and everywhere else, I thought that by being here, I could learn more specifically about what it means to move into a future that we're all hoping we can create together. And I wanted people in this community to be able to open their door and recognize that they belonged to something and heard each other, knew each other, wanted to nurture each other together, take care of each other, whatever that is. And you can only do that if you're listening. I look at this station, and I know Jimmy does as well, as it's a social good organization. It's not a radio station. It's something else. The station isn't just about what goes over the airwaves. It's about the block parties. It's about being at City Hall and letting people know what's going on. It's about these other ways it can put its tentacles into the community and be an amplifier of what's really already happening. So it's not, I'm buying a station somewhere so that it can survive and play things that are liberal. It's no, we're in here to help sustain, build, and grow a nurturing, loving place. We have an ecosystemic problem. This is not, if we could just fix this, everything would be great. No, this is complex, and so we do. We look at food and health and education and energy and agriculture and all these different things that all make up this tapestry, and the station, it's critical to the health of this place.
Being funded the way we are, we have the sense of what life can be post-capitalism. People don't realize this, but in the first two Star Trek series with Captain Kirk and Captain Picard, both of them make statements about how somewhere in the 21st century, mankind decided that money wasn't necessary and that we worked for the good of each other. And maybe that happens somehow, This is a little taste of that. We come in here, and it's not about our salaries as much as the mission. I'm Jimmy Buff, and Frank Oranger is coming along.
Yeah, so you get the picture here. It's quite shocking, actually, the way he puts it, post-capitalism, and putting the tentacles in the community, like Peter was saying, excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. he's looking at many different things, and they're all kind of coalescing as one ecosystem. So that's why his investments are spawning many different avenues as far as the ecosystem of Kingston goes. So, anyways, yeah, it's kind of, putting out the linguistic programming, like, oh, like, this is, what a beautiful life, we're gonna move beyond a world of money and so forth. It's not about the money, and, it's like, that's kind of disingenuous when, like, all of this stuff is coming from Berkshire Hathaway stock. Like, yikes. Okay, anyway. The station broadcasts daily reminders about the Foundation's ongoing efforts to better the community. Often one will hear shows hosted by employees of Novo funded organizations interviewing the employees of other Novo-funded organizations about the projects and campaigns they run that are funded by Novo. Heading south from the radio station's new studio, I came upon the 9,000 square foot food co-op building, a third of which is set aside for things like office space for community project initiatives. Purchased by Novo, the building is set to open in the next 2 years. Down the block is the Hudson Valley Current, a local currency operation funded by Novo. This is not a cryptocurrency, as some might suspect, but it is, in fact, a new physical money designed to circulate exclusively within the new Kingston economy. The bills are roughly the size of euros, and they are gorgeous works of art with bright, richly colored scenes of nature that feature local animals like the blue heron and the rusty-patched bumblebee. That afternoon, I looked for places where one could spend the new currency, but many of the current friendly businesses lacked physical locations, their proprietors likely working from home. These included dozens of services offering website design, somatic movement therapy, workshops on eating well for cheap, and expanding consciousness and closing the gap with the essential oil wizard. There were consultants as well, many consultants, and creative writing workshops. It's completely useless to the vast majority of people who live and work in Kingston, said a longtime Kingston nonprofit employee who's received Novo funding. I can't use it to pay my rent, I can't do my laundry, I can't buy clothes or food with the current, but I can go get a massage or acupuncture. That is not actually going to save the people of Kingston. Intense poverty still persists in Kingston alongside the effects of gentrification. You have two things at play in that neighborhood, a former employee of a Novo-funded entity and local resident explained to me. One being a community dealing with incredibly impoverished generational poverty, which interestingly for that area of Kingston is both black and white with a lot of interracial families. The second thing is a very significant undocumented community, mostly Salvadoran and Honduran. The other layer to this is you have a lot of gun violence, and in the pocket where Novo is building and investing, you see an area that's been more policed than in any other part of Kingston. So I'd say you have the hallmarks for a successful gentrification and possibly hyper-gentrification. If those on the receiving end of Novo's transformation of Kingston have a consistent critique, it's the lack of transparency about what exactly Novo is up to and why. The why factor, right? That's the big one. And their inability to alter the outcome. Because Novo dispenses its funds by the tens of millions of dollars directly in the form of Novo grants, Buffett bucks, as some call them, along with tens of millions of dollars through several other entities like United Way, the New World Foundation, and Community Foundation. There's no comprehensive public documentation of how much Novo has spent in the region. Novo does not publish an annual report, and its statements offer little insight. I don't know how else to describe it except the kind of serfdom or this neo-feudalism when you design your kingdom and you have your blacksmith and your farmer and everyone gets particular tasks, a former employee of a Novo-funded entity told me. It's a reverberation of something like that, where it feels to me like people are pulling the levers of your life behind the scenes. It's these well-resourced people on behalf of these other folks saying what you think the world needs, but you're not allowing anyone to have their own self-determination. As a nonprofit entity with tax-exempt status, the public financial records that Novo is legally required to file offer only a partial view that is often 2 or more years behind current spending. Any funding that Novo wishes to obscure can be distributed behind the shield of a donor-advised fund. In 2019, for example, more than $15 million in donor-advised grants were dispersed by Novo with no public disclosure of its purpose or recipients. Ooh, I think of it as a tidal wave. The Novo money just washes over everything here and nothing can withstand it, one longtime Novo collaborator and Kingston resident told me. Just to find somebody who's not connected to it or supported by the foundation in some way right now is very challenging. I'm ridiculously transparent even if Novo isn't. What? Peter wrote on Facebook in April in response to questions about the foundation's purpose. I've written songs, op-eds, articles, essays for days, podcasts, talks, on the road for over 10 years. My thoughts are pretty obvious. This is true. To the surprise of many in Kingston, Peter Buffett is an extremely engaged presence, at least online, where he often gets into heated debates with non-Novo affiliated Kingstonites. Sensitive about claims that he's a billionaire rather than a multimillionaire, though his leadership of a billion-dollar foundation can obscure the difference, Peter also spends a great deal of time on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pushing back against observations that the Novo Foundation is attempting to redesign Kingston into its own bespoke utopia. I'm not trying to create my utopia, and in fact, I may just be a benevolent human being. I think benevolent and force can't be used in the same sentence, he recently wrote on Facebook. What then is Peter Buffett trying to create? Some contractors who've worked recently for the Novo-funded groups at the former IBM campus have been required to sign contracts with non-disclosure agreements before they begin, said one person familiar with the Tech City project. But when those collaborating with Novo have asked for actual plans they could share, they've repeatedly been turned down. How could there not be a document? Who the fuck spends $200 million without a grant? A longtime Novo collaborator told me. Without a plan. In Peter's own writings, performances, and interviews, however, one can perceive a patchwork ideology that appears heavily influenced by the 60s counterculture. That Peter has made his home in Kingston, the overlooked little brother to the heady bohemian enclave of Woodstock, New York, just 12 miles away, does not seem like an accident. Peter wrote an essay in 2019 on the 50th anniversary of the Woodstock Music Festival. A new consciousness will not arise from some old political form, whether left or right, or from a social structure named socialist, communist, or capitalist, he wrote. Then why are you railing against capitalism, then, is my question. Okay, some inconsistencies here. All right, he's into Native American cosmology and prophecy. The places our current movement in world history at a potentially apocalyptic crossroads between the 7th and 8th rings of fire. That's kind of disturbing, isn't it? Anyways, Jennifer explained in an interview, his wife, about the Novo Foundation alongside her husband, society will ignite the 8th fire, a time of peace and harmony for all people. If society does not correct itself, however, we will soon find that the other path leads to our destruction. Peter's apocalyptic reasoning remains a little opaque, to say the least, possibly intentionally so. Novo Foundation employees have suggested that the Kingston community is not yet ready to have the conversation about the foundation's plans for the city, but a clue to Peter's real-world goals comes from one of his most outspoken employees. On the Novo-owned radio station, Kirk has held roundtable discussions with other leaders in what's been described as the localization movement, sometimes referred to as the degrowth movement, very important, which seeks to offer an alternative to capitalism as a way to solve the ills of climate change, poverty, and wealth inequality. Proponents of degrowth, like Kirk, have often courted controversy by offering theories of severe top-down changes to how society should distribute goods as basic as food, water, and energy, and by openly speculating about the capacity of average citizens to grasp what true localism would look like in action. In a debate about how best to install localism in Kingston, Kirk asked his guests recently, is this something that would resonate widely in the community, or is this something that you think smaller groups of people need to be deeply informed about, but everybody else doesn't need to be? If some of those involved are concerned about alienating the local community by keeping them in the dark, it's in part because the systemic changes that Kirk has written about and advocated for in the past are decidedly extreme. Referencing the social democracies of Sweden and Finland, Kirk has written that while these systems clearly produce more positive social outcomes than laissez-faire systems do, even the best of them don't offer the solutions we so urgently need right now in an era of climate change and ecological collapse. Kirk cites degrowth advocates and localism movement activists who are willing to break through the dry seals of neoclassical economic theory upon which capitalism rests in favor of new systems. The core logic of the global operating system is going unchallenged. There are hopeful signs from the vanguard of activism, but they are tentative and vulnerable, he's written elsewhere. We argue that far more attention needs to be paid to those whole system dynamics, to the most fundamental rules of the global operating system. For those who tune into Radio Kingston, there's a regular conversation about moving to what this post capitalist society could potentially look like. Described as a just transition, the new Kingston would largely be built upon the various organizations, agricultural producers, artists, and consultancies that have been entirely or predominantly funded by the Novo Foundation over the past few years. And now, with the tech city about to serve as their primary hub, and a new printed currency in the form of the Hudson current as the local money to drive it, Kingston is moving closer to a degrowth future, even if it's not at all clear what that will look like. In the degrowth scheme, companies would need to be categorized as either operating in the public interest and thus allowed to continue business as usual, or socially undesirable and therefore subject to wind down. Again, like who determines what is in service of the public interest and what isn't? I think that's important. I just wanted to add to here that the degrowth scheme really favors philanthropic giving over governments and businesses, because if basically the only organizations that can exist are ones that are for the social good, that is essentially nonprofits exclusively. And so then they become the nucleus of the economy and the society at large. Not surprisingly, many Kingstonites I spoke with had conflicted feelings about Novo's investment in their city. On the one hand, the doctrines of social equity and feel-good urbanism preached by the Foundation's network of local agencies and NGOs are seen as part of an inherently superior code of social conduct, but the side effects of the Buffett's fashionable ideology are also hard to ignore. It just feels like a freight train that's moving through Kingston, one longtime Kingston nonprofit employee told me. Those who've watched Buffett funding flood into the city's tax-free business sector, the sheer quantity of money has led to a kind of whiplash. As that nonprofit employee explained, some of these organizations were either very small or didn't exist a few years ago, and suddenly we started hearing about the budgets going from 30 grand a year to 750 grand over 3 years, and it's just like, wow, what the hell? Some of these organizations are great, but that's crazy. It's also not always clear why some groups are allowed onto the gravy train and others aren't. There's literally no process, one NGO employee told me. There's never been an open request for proposal. There's never been guidance or criteria as to how you can get money. It's a hand-picked process, so I don't know what the process is for anybody else. You have to know the people, you have to be in the in-group. Other foundations, they put out RFPs, there's a proposal that people can apply for, but here that doesn't exist. You get asked to apply, but once you get asked, you basically have it. Those in Kingston who don't align with the larger Novo vision find themselves unable to gain much traction in a landscape that is now owned by the Buffetts. The weird thing about Novo is they fund so many small nonprofits in the Hudson Valley that even when you have meetings with folks outside of Novo, it's still a Novo meeting, one past employee of a Novo-funded nonprofit told me. I'm sitting here at this project meeting with 4 other people, and then I realized that every single person there had some relationship to Novo Money through their organization, and they were only there on behalf of their organization. And at one point I said, "Is this a Novo project?" And they were all like, no, this is just a nonprofit group funded by Novo's project," the former employee told me. There's this issue in Kingston where you get involved in initiatives and you realize that the vast majority of the folks are representing organizations that are funded by Novo. Given their abandonment by IBM and given the Buffetts' abandonment of their own previously vaunted initiatives, some Kingstonites are understandably nervous about what could happen if the Buffetts had another change of heart, while others prefer not to think about it. They're just woefully ignorant, so people can just keep sucking on the Buffett teat. One current staffer of a Novo-funded entity told me. Despite the absolutely skeevy handling of the New York City Women's Building, this huge scandal, everyone here wants to be blind and deaf to it. The issue is that it's not sustainable, another collaborator told me. Some of the nonprofits have grown in a way that if Novo pulls out, they're going to be screwed. But the money is so good it's hard to turn down. At the Hudson Valley Farm Hub, the executive director, associate director, and farm manager are paid $275,000, $242,000, and $206,000 respectively. According to the most recent public financial documents, in 2019, Novo committed at least another $47.2 million to support the farm hub's operations, which would bring their total investment in the farm to over $100 million. Okay, you get the idea. It's a lot of money. And since Buffett began investing tens of millions of dollars into Ulster County, gentrification has only accelerated. Some new residents are employees of Novo-funded entities, while others simply gravitate towards small cities in close proximity to hubs like New York, places that provide amenities like local designer currencies, community-centric broadcasts, and farmers markets well stocked with heirloom produce grown and cultivated by a team of farmers with master's degrees in agriculture. Earlier this year, the New York Times declared Kingston the second most desirable location in the nation, according to the pandemic migration patterns. That's important too. Pandemic migration patterns. Remember that. Analysis of home prices this past April found the average sale price in Kingston was up an average of 32% from the previous year. This was, in fact, the only issue on which I received a direct comment from Peter Buffett during the course of my reporting. Before heading to Kingston, I reached out to ask if he'd be willing to discuss the foundation's investment in the city. He declined. Housing and gentrification have been a concern since Novo started working in Kingston, he wrote to me. The pandemic has definitely made the situation critical, and I'm concerned about further attention being paid to the area, frankly. It seems to be too late for that at this point. Peter knew that these people are just going to come in and do their creative, cool hipster thing, and then the money just flows in after them, said one small business owner in Kingston who's concerned about the negative ramifications of speaking critically in public about Novo. The whole picture here is just the flow of money, the propaganda from the radio station, the mystification of where power resides. It all adds up to this class of people that are in this dreamlike trance. It's like a cult, and they're true believers. And they just want the party to keep going and going and going. Yes, there's a bunch of rich hipsters moving in, basically. Attentive nurses from Health Alliance, the local hospital, were collecting signatures to fight to reopen their rehab and detox center that had been shut down to save costs during the pandemic. Opiates and fentanyl are big time, one nurse said to me. According to New York State's most recent annual report, Ulster was the second highest county for hospital discharges due to opioid use statewide, ahead of the Bronx. Kingston's poor residents are falling through the cracks because of lack of funding. For example, over the past year, the owners of Chiz's House, a boarding home in Kingston, for as many as 60 residents, many suffering from schizophrenia, had tried to find a new owner willing to buy the building and let the tenants stay. But no one would purchase the place on those terms because the property has too much potential value without the tenants. Various advocacy groups in Kingston fought for either Ulster County or the Novo Foundation to purchase the building and convert the group home into a fully funded nonprofit, just as Novo had done with other organizations across the city. I spoke to Peter, a daughter of a Chiz House tenant, wrote on Facebook about her attempts to save her mother's group home. She says she asked him if he could help, but he told her, the fact is Novo tries to build self-sufficient programs, and Chiz's was better suited to be fixed by the local government. The building was finally sold in May and the tenants were evicted. Another group home, the Bridges, was also recently sold, leaving its disabled residents without a place to live. Why not put something into helping people who are actually desperately and urgently in need of help right now? People that nobody else was going to help, a Kingston nonprofit employee who's received Novo funding told me. Instead of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on an artwork currency, why not save Chiz's house and all these people who are now homeless? Yeah. There are two Kingstons, the old and the new, and they're both changing. Peter Buffett's Novo Foundation has a plan, but nobody knows exactly what that is, and that too is part of the plan. I joke about it, that we're trying to use money as if money doesn't matter, he once said. But that's the trick. You have to use the existing structure so that the existing structure can go away. This is a powerful article. I suggest you read it yourself, to be honest. It's really disturbing. So this is just a little peek at the Novo Foundation's website. Novo has had a reputation for being at the margins, speaking up when asked, and amplifying whatever, wherever needed. So clearly that's not the case, right? It seems like that's really not the case. Because who knows, even like how many of these groups that they funded have actually worked towards like serving these communities that they purport to serve. I mean, that's a whole nother video, right? Yeah, how did they decide what to fund, right? Because there's no process for it. Look at the big picture and address root causes to maximize their philanthropy's lasting impact. So it's about building a whole new system. This is essentially like an experiment that they're running in Kingston, New York. An experiment in alternative governance structures and privatized governance. That's what it's about. So this whole thing, oh, these systems are all based on domination, competition, and exploitation. I mean, I don't really see a difference, really. Like how is what how are they doing something different here? I mean, to be honest, this seems worse to me. Let's see, what do they say about the Women's Building Project? Yeah, so they don't own up to the fact that they just like pulled funding at all. Why Kingston of all places? I think it has something to do with IBM, to be honest. If I didn't know any better. What can I do if I disagree with the work being done? Oh, get involved. Yeah, get involved in, another organization funded by the same people, right? Controlled op, right? What are you doing to address the housing crisis in Kingston? Emergency housing, rental support, home ownership, and more. Like, again, a lot of these services, they're really, it's funny how he decides arbitrarily what are government services and what aren't, right? He didn't want to fund the halfway house or whatever because that's supposed to be a government service, but then he's doing all these other things that really, I mean, would be government services as well. So it's very selective. Yeah. Aren't these? Yes. Just completely transparent. Yes. They're contributing to gentrification. Um, this is why I called it Novo Linguistic programming, because he's using words to confuse people and manipulate them. That's what I'm getting. And I would guess too that many of these FAQs were not present until this article was published. I would assume so. It seems like damage control to me. I'm not comfortable with the private foundation having this much influence in my community. The money is needed and welcome, but isn't this the exact problem with the current system? Too much power in too few hands. We are committed to helping democratize the local economy and spread wealth and influence more broadly as a feature of all the democratic or economic development work we support. And we are working on projects ourselves like the Community Fund. So, anyways, you get the picture. They're full of shit. This is just like a brief primer on the foundation itself. Directs millions each year to left of center groups advocating for abortion, LGBT interests, and liberal economics. So, yeah, he's very involved in all of this stuff. Has a problem with microlending and financial literacy as well. Which, to be honest, I'm kind of undecided on. But it's interesting. I mean, lots of tentacles here, right? Look at all these institutions. This is interesting, the End Rape on Campus project. I just noticed that all of that programming kind of came alongside a bunch of censorship on campus. Just an observation. I was in college at the time that this was very popular, so. They gave a bunch of money to the New Venture Fund, which spends hundreds of millions on behalf of left-wing causes each year. It's a dark money group that allows liberal activists to spend millions on left-wing campaigns while being cloaked in anonymity. Anonymity. I'm having a really hard time speaking today. I'm really sorry about that. It's part of the liberal mega donor collective Democracy Alliance. So, yeah. This is big. Novo provided $350,000 to Borealis Philanthropy for its fund for trans generations. I have a big problem with that. This is a big issue for me. For those of you who know me personally, this is a huge fucking issue for me. The fund is used to support transgender activists and organizations. In 2019, the fund provided financial support to over 50 transgender interest projects. So, yeah, that's complete bullshit. You can't say, oh, you're against violence against women and support transgenderism at the same time, because transgenderism hurts women a lot. It hurts women a lot. And if anyone is interested in this, please comment below and I will send you sources. It's a horrible fucking thing. And I've known a lot of people personally that have fallen into it. It's a cult and it's bullshit. Anyone who fucking funds that shit is just funding the medical industrial complex and hurting everyone's fucking brain. You know, because just black is white, apples are oranges, men are women. No. Anyone funding that, no. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. Fuck you. Just fuck you. Anyways. Oh yeah, and stop acting like you care about gay people, because you fucking don't. The T does not fucking give a fuck about the LGB at all. Alright? Nothing to do with that at all. Nothing to do with that. Anyway. Yeah, Transgender Law Center. Fuck that. Fuck that. Seriously. Okay. Abortion, whatever. Left of center economics. I think this is really interesting too. Because the degrowth movement is about basically decreasing GDP, or it's like very critical of using GDP as a metric. And things like wages are included in GDP. So like you're kind of working at cross purposes if you're saying like, oh, well, GDP doesn't matter and whatever, but also we're going to raise wages. And it's like, okay, you can't have it both ways. Seriously. I mean, let's just like, hold on. You know what? I'll get into that in a second. Let's just see if there's anything else I wanted to point out here. Yeah, and you know, like, I'm not against protections for illegal immigrant workers per se, but I think there are some loopholes with this legislation where they can use concern over undocumented people as an excuse to implement New World Order sort of things. You know, because if they can get rid of the pre-existing standards for, you know, applications to citizenship and so forth, then they can kind of pioneer the whole global citizen thing. So that's interesting as well. Let's see. Title IX guidance. That's interesting because transgenderism has radically altered Title IX in a very big way. In a very big way. Not in a good way. And Black Lives Matter, I mean, you know, many people think that Black Lives Matter is some sort of color revolution organization that doesn't really care about black people at all, and like I would kind of tend to agree with that, so that's interesting as well. Okay, immigration. It's just interesting, right? Gun control. Anyways, wanted to touch on that. Okay, so kind of getting back to Kingston, New York, and I appreciate it if you've gotten this far and you listened to me read that entire article, because it was a long article, but I really appreciate it because now with that knowledge, I can kind of get into some of these other things here. So rather than read through this whole document, I just want to talk about some things that I found within it. So again, like neuro-linguistic programming, we will co-create a people-centered local economy. Like, come on. I fucking hate the word co-create. I don't know who came up with that shit, but it sounds like bullshit to me. Okay, so people-centered local economy. They want to pitch it as like to the benefit of people, right? But this is kind of like what Alison McDowell talks about in terms of impact markets. It's really more about people as a commodity. That's kind of the gist of it. So yeah, I think, you know, people want to say, oh, you know, we're moving towards moving towards a world where money doesn't matter, right? Because it's like you are the money, like you are the good, like you are the thing being analyzed. And this project in privatized governance shows us that, you know, it makes it so that they can observe people in a very real way. Um, that's what the radio station, I think, is for too, because they bring a lot of people over to that radio station who wouldn't otherwise have a platform, which, there isn't anything wrong with that in and of itself. But again, to put the tentacles into the community, as Peter was saying, they need to get a good idea of who is in the community and what their ideas are, right? So that they can then co-opt them and use them to their own ends. So, okay, yeah, we know it's a very impoverished county. What's interesting too with the pandemic migration patterns, right? And being close to the New York City metro area is if they can build many of these privatized cities, in Rust Belt areas like Kingston, then that serves as sort of a, let's say, growing area for alternative governance structures and impact markets that you would not necessarily get from a pre-existing city. And I kind of touched on this in my last video. Like New York can't really be built from the ground up, but a place like Kingston can, right? So you purchase a small town that doesn't have a lot of income, you make, whatever you want with it, and then you attract residents from places like New York to go there. And COVID, migration patterns cause people to move out of major cities and into places like this. And so it's also really interesting that people like John Bush are encouraging people to leave major cities. And in a way, that's exactly what these other elites are encouraging as well, because it's very difficult to live in New York. It's very expensive. So yeah, it's not going to work for people. Are going to look for other options. And so if you can make these pre-existing cities like intolerable places to live, then they'll be more drawn to a place like Kingston, which, as the article mentioned, drew a lot of residents, right? Anyways. So then there's the focus on clean energy and environment. And what I think is interesting here is it says Ulster County has emerged as a clean energy leader, becoming the first carbon neutral county government in New York State. That's huge. That is huge. Carbon neutral, that's huge. Yeah, because carbon is the metric through which the New World Order will be able to measure our consumption of things and regulate us accordingly. So if they've established, carbon neutral government, then they're going to use that as a springboard for carbon neutral everything, and that will become embedded into the local ecosystem as well. So another thing from this document that I found interesting. In the realm of traditional economic development, the primary objective is to maximize gross domestic product, or another similar measure of the dollar value of an economy's output. There is power in the simplicity of this approach, and in many meaningful ways, it has served us well for the past 100 years. But its shortcomings are becoming clear. Human well-being depends on more than material wealth, especially when that wealth is measured in the aggregate rather than the individual or community level, where it could at least account for the impacts of disparity and inequality. So I just want to quickly look at GDP for a second. Okay, so obviously it includes things like goods, services, government expenditures, including salaries of government employees, road construction, repair, public schools, and military expenditure. And some of a country's investments spent on capital equipment, inventories, and housing. Net exports. There's also the income approach, which is the sum of all wages, rent, interest, and profits. Sales taxes, depreciation, net foreign factor income. So I just want to point out that there's a lot of factors here with GDP. So just saying that, like, oh, you know, we want to work towards a society in which GDP doesn't matter. Well, it's like people's salaries matter, right? You want wage increases. Okay, well, maybe that would be included in GDP as well. So you can't really say, oh, you can't really work towards both things. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, oh, we want to help the local economy, but we want to place a cap on, you know, GDP with this whole degrowth movement. So it seems contradictory at best, to be honest. Anyways. In the vein of recent attempts to replace GDP and growth as a primary metric, our vision expands the definition of success with references opportunity and prosperity. Here we take opportunity to mean the broad set of circumstances that would make it possible for individuals to prosper, and prosperity we establish a deliberate reference to the growing body of research in the economic development literature that defines the ultimate objective of any economy as a multidimensional mix of factors that contribute to human well-being. So, I don't know, does this not look like a list of multidimensional factors? Like, what other factors should be included here? I mean, it seems like anything else would be kind of vague, right? Like, happiness index or something? I mean, come on, like, what are we talking about here? There's no specifics. And that's another criticism of this whole project that Peter Buffett has, is it's just not specific enough. Like, people don't know what this, you know, what's the ultimate goal? Like, where is it going? That's really unclear. Oh, but what we do know is that the UN Sustainable Development Goals are a good metric of what we should be focused on, right? And that's in this document that's for, you know, developing this local economy in like a very small town, really. It's not a big town. It's like 200,000 people or something. So is it really appropriate to be using that language in this documentation that's supposed to be for, you know, regenerating this local economy? I don't think so. I don't think that's appropriate at all. And here's the working group, and we're going to get into some of these people really quickly. Let me just see if there's anything else from here I wanted to go over. So, yeah, advisory group. So, like, this advisory group seems to be just handpicked and not at all like voted for. So, but they have technical experience and whatever, so we want their opinions on things. So, like, anyways, let's go over to the working group here. The working group is made up of a diverse group of community leaders from throughout Ulster County, representing a range of industries, occupations, and interests. So, I'm confident that this effort will shape a new direction for economic, community, and workforce development that can help all of our residents prosper. I want to thank County Executive Pat Ryan and all the members of this exciting group for prioritizing our local economy. So, over the next 9 months, the group will work to develop a strategic framework with goals and metrics to guide the county's economic development efforts and to respond to short and long-term challenges and opportunities. So there's a couple of people that I found on this list that I think are interesting. Nell's leader is vice president of Bread Alone Bakery, a trained climate leader for Al Gore's Climate Reality Project, and co-owner of Woodstock Meats, Woodstock's butcher, grocery, and deli since 1964. So yeah, climate leader for Al Gore's climate reality project. I mean, so he's like trained in a particular line of thinking, and also particular language to be used to sell the agenda that the climate reality project has to the public, right? Okay. And then there's Evelyn Wright, who is an economist, energy analyst, and consultant on energy policy for local, state, and national governments and environmental organizations. She's the founder of Commonwealth Hudson Valley, promoting a more just, democratic, and sustainable economy in the Hudson Valley and beyond. So yeah, and she has a PhD in ecological economics. So that has a lot to do with the degrowth movement as well. I'm going to be going into the degrowth movement soon. So, but in any case, it speaks to a broader agenda, right? Beyond whatever is going on in Kingston, New York. Like, these people have a broader agenda in mind, and this is like their testing ground. So yeah, this is quickly from a document called Degrowth and the Sustainable Development Goals, which I want to go into more detail about later. What would it take to create an economy that served these objectives and that measured what we really value? First, we must recognize that no single metric can encompass all of the diverse components of health for all, especially not a monolithic, highly distorted measure like GDP. We should move towards a global data collection apparatus and analytical framework that abandons such simplistic indices. Second, alternative metrics must fit together as part of a holistic approach that allows for information to be transparently debated and replicated across diverse local contexts. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. The 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals provide a robust foundation for building better metrics and indicators. With a mission-oriented approach, we can start to redesign industrial and innovation policies to meet grand societal challenges, pursuing concrete targets and encouraging sectors to work together to deliver policy solutions such as carbon-neutral cities. What did we find in this document again? Oh, fuck, where is it? Come on. I just told you. Oh, yeah. Ulster County has emerged as a clean energy leader, becoming the first carbon-neutral county government in New York State. So, there you go. Right in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. That's the only criticism I have of this article, is that it doesn't mention the Sustainable Development Goals, but I think it did an excellent job covering the Peter Buffett angle, so very pleased with that. Thank you, Sean Cooper. Excellent, excellent work. Excellent article here. Yeah, and so this lady is on that panel. So she's an economist, energy analyst, has worked as a consultant for energy policy. Dr. Wright's portfolio as deputy county executive, which is another, this is a high-level position within the working group, will include the implementation of County Executive Ryan's Green New Deal and Grow and Diversify Our Economy for All priorities and environmental, energy, and economic development initiatives. This is annoying. Go away. This website sucks. Yeah, so she wants to, re-envision the economy, show that government can actually work for everyone. Again, it's just interesting because these people are kind of like handpicked and no one really has a say about it, and it's a similar thing to, the Novo Foundation in that sense. And Peter Buffett, clearly, his goals for redesigning the economy are in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, I think. I think that's pretty clear right now. So, yeah, so she's also involved with the Climate Reality Project. Anyways, just thought that was interesting. So, okay, I'm going to wrap this up because I just want to talk about neuro-linguistic programming really quick. I don't really know much about this, to be honest, but I know that this is a technique that can be used to manipulate people, and I think that we are seeing a very sophisticated propaganda effort here as far as what people like Peter Buffett are putting out. And just as an example, like, we can watch a little bit more of this video. Let me see.
At the top of the hour to
Where is...
has made Kingston unique.
The city came up with a vision plan.
Let's just watch
Talk
this
about
real
that
quick.
process and what
This is the
was, or
mayor.
what was that document about?
We wanted to have a 10-year vision to be able to make sure that each of our neighborhoods would have attention, that we would focus on our assets, and really be able to build a community from the ground up. As you drove down from the radio station, you'll see we had an uptown, a midtown, and a downtown. And I think one part of our comprehensive plan is to figure out how to stitch together our community back together again, so that we are a community of one, and one that really looks out for one another, and can, if one neighborhood is doing well, the other parts of the city would also prosper.
And what role does the radio station play?
So one of the things that I've really tried to do is to be able to get more residents connected to the city. And I think having a community radio station is vital to do that. Because unfortunately, with all of the media conglomerates across the world buying up every little bitty radio station, you basically can hear the same thing on 100 different stations at any point in our country. And for us, we were going to lose one of our only locally owned radio stations. And at the perfect opportunity, Radio Kingston came to be. And for us, it's connecting a whole new voice to Kingston. Folks who have never had a voice before now have an outlet to be able to talk about their issues, talk about their concerns, and to be able to have equal airtime, as everyone else in the city. And so as the mayor, I have Mondays with the mayor. And so I have a 30-minute block where I'm able to go ahead and talk about issues that are important to me. But there's also every other organization and every group in the city that wants to say something has just as much time or more time than I do. And so that's something that is unique about community radio. And I think it's something that, a small community like Kingston is really lucky to have.
You have the unusual good fortune as mayor of having some fairly well-endowed people living in your neighborhood, meaning enormous philanthropists with the Novo Foundation and Jennifer and Peter Buffett. How do you think about that? And how should we think about what's happening in Kingston? Would it be possible without some large donors?
So one of the things that I think has made Kingston unique is that, we never really had the large foundations. We don't have the corporate entities. There's really not a lot of planned giving in our community. And so Kingston has always had to, over the 400-year history, really be able to make its own way. And for us, I think...
What about IBM?
Using that funding to be able to create an environment where the citizenry is engaged, and the public can recognize that we kind of teach you a new way, and then you'll continue to do that even if the Buffetts aren't here tomorrow. They're not necessarily, building billion-dollar buildings here in Kingston, but I think that they're putting their efforts into entities and organizations that care about people, and I think that there will be a lot of dividends, and I think that could happen in any community.
First off,
anyway, so it's just interesting, this propaganda. Look at that duper's delight right there. Come on. So I think that's kind of the goal of the radio station, honestly. And they're feeding people like political ideas and this sort of thing, and like positing it as something that, everyone can have a voice and whatever, but here's the thing though, it's like anyone can have a voice as long as it doesn't conflict with the goals of the Novo Foundation, right? I think that's pretty clear. So anyone who wants to shill for the Novo Foundation is welcome to, and this is an interesting thing too, because in neuro-linguistic programming, you have to develop rapport with the person who you are trying to program, right? So once that's established, the practitioner may gather information about the client's present state and help the client define a desired state or goal for the interaction. So it's like the radio station can kind of set up like, okay, what do you want to see in Kingston? What matters to you, right? And kind of mirror that and imitate that. Okay. The client is typically encouraged to consider the consequences of the desired outcome and how they may affect his or her personal and professional life and relationships, taking into account any positive intentions, any problems that arise. So it's just interesting. Like the reason why I think it's unclear as to what they're doing is because they need it to remain that way so that they can simply gain a better understanding of what people think they want for their community, and then imitate that and take that essentially and make it their own. I think that's kind of what Peter Buffett is doing. So like modeling is one of these techniques. So the other thing is, this is a model, right? This is a community that will be set up as a model for other communities. So like focusing, as it says, on the success you want and those associated behaviors. And then mirroring, again, tone of voice, body language, message. Mirroring is an NLP technique that leverages body language to make instant connections and build rapport with anyone. When you're talking to someone, mirror your body language to theirs. So that's the thing. It's like Radio Kingston gets local people to come on so that the goals of the Novo Foundation can mirror whatever it is that people are saying. And so that's why Peter Buffett can get away with saying things like, oh yeah, philanthropy is a huge problem and like we need to change the system and so forth, because that's what other people have been saying already. So like he's covering his ass before he can even get criticized for anything. And like we can see that on his website too. It's like all of these things, all of these potential problems, it's already covered because he's already collected the data on people. So he's already aware of the criticisms and he knows how to linguistically avoid them, even if he doesn't avoid them in reality, right? And incantations, powerful affirmations. So again, if you just keep saying local community, oh, this and that, like if they just keep pushing that, then it becomes truth, right? So yeah, and they weren't very transparent about the fact that Novo Foundation is funding all this stuff. Like when she was talking to the mayor, it's like, oh well, they're not doing anything too crazy, they're not building billion-dollar buildings and so forth, and it's like it's all propaganda, right? I mean, I could even go back earlier and show you how. Hold on, let me see. This guy's kind of a joke, honestly.
This radio station and its frequency belong to the people of Kingston. And so bringing it back to the people of Kingston, giving the people of Kingston who didn't have a chance to have access maybe to being on the air here before, is why we're doing what we're doing. And the end result is hopefully a city that falls in love with itself.
Yeah. So it's like about, quote unquote, giving people a voice.
The syndicated programming, which is programming that doesn't come from here, doesn't employ local people, and has no real value to the community, and started replacing it with local programming. And since then, we've added, my guess is about 30 different radio shows representing many, many different voices of the community.
You're listening to La Voz. Estás...
Yeah, so that's how they can get away with this, is they can make a critique of, oh, well, we're not some big corporate entity, like we don't have to approve, content, like the advertisers, like we don't have advertisers, so it doesn't matter, you can say literally whatever you want. Again, nothing comes for free. That's just life. That's just what it is. So Anyways, I appreciate you listening to this video, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you so much. All right, checking out.